Might be the most bitter rivalry, but it's a fair old rivalry. It's Christy Moher against the Saw Doctors, the Burren against Connemara, Salthill against Lisdoonvarna, and the Cliffs of Moher against the Spanish Arch. Galway against Clare. It is still a fair old rivalry, Michael Verney.
Oh, geez, it is, yeah. And they're neighbouring counties as well. There's always that, extra little bit of needle between two neighbouring counties. They haven't met, that many times, but when they have met, they've been fairly seismic kind of meetings, and they've had serious ramifications for both counties, as we'll go through here now. But it's hard beat that kind of neighbouring rivalry and that bit of needle between neighbours. And like just what you're saying there, like Christy Moore versus the Saw Doctors, the Alloy Caves versus the Spanish Arch. It's hard to pick between these. Like these are some of the greatest things on the kind of western coast. So it's an interesting rivalry.
There's a streak of madness on the west coast. I've always said it. Some amount of mad jokes from that side of the country. But right, so we're here with orgaretro.com. Get the jerseys there if you want them. Lovely jerseys. Our game if you want 15% off. That's the promo code. But it's not that it's a poisonous rivalry. But there's no way you like losing to your neighbours. But the likes of I think Tubber and Gort, they'd be right there on the line from each other. They'd probably go boozing together. There's probably players that have played for either side over the years. Actually, there was one example, the late Niall McInerney. He was part of the Breakthrough Galway team in 1980, but he's originally from 6 Mile Bridge, and he first played inter-county at home before he went to Galway. So you can imagine back over the years as well, the amount of lads from Clare who went to college in Galway. So that rivalry, I'd say, it really does run deep.
Definitely, and even Ger Loughnane, there's an article with RTE from a couple of years ago, and Ger Loughnane said that there were several different John Smiths hovering near the border who've played both with Galway and Clare underage, and they have medals on their mantelpiece from playing with both counties. Ger actually just said a good deal of players from South Galway would have played for teams in Clare under false names. This is especially applied to Tubber and Crusheen on the border in North Clare. You have numerous tales of players from South Galway, especially from Baha and Kilbacanty, all along there, that won championships in Galway and won them in Clare at underage. You have the reverse as well, he said, players from Clare going up and playing with those teams in Galway in underage championships. In the digital age of modern media, couldn't possibly get away with, but they got away with at the time. It is a running joke, he said, where you have a lot of fellas in their 50s and 60s who played in both championships, which again, that's when you're that close to another county, and those things will happen. It's nearly a pity. Like, that's another one of those things that's gone out of GA. It's obviously not possible to do that anymore, but you love hearing those stories from the past of kind of the different kind of stroking and different things that were going on between clubs and counties on the borders.
Yeah, if you go back to the first ever championship clash between these two teams, neither of us remember it was 105 years ago in 1915. So Clare came in as reigning All-Ireland champions, and up until 95 this was the first, obviously they hadn't been too successful in the intervening 81 years, but there's a great story behind this. So the Munster Championship hadn't finished by the time the All-Ireland semi-final came around. So Clare ended up beating Galway 2-1 to 1-1 in the semi-final, having been appointed as the Munster
an epic, of course, an epic.
Yeah, back in those days.
3 scores to 2.
Oh, sure, the scorelines back in those days. I mean, I was looking it up earlier. I think Cork won one of the games by 4 goals to 3-1, and maybe Clare scored 10 goals in the first round against Waterford. So ridiculous scorelines back then. But Clare had been put through. They won the All-Ireland semi-final. In the intervening period, the Munster final took place where Cork dethroned Clare. So then, instead of Clare going through to the All-Ireland final, Cork were just kind of jumped through. So Clare actually won an All-Ireland semi-final that year, but didn't actually get to play in the final. Cork ended up losing to Laois, who of course didn't even have to play an All-Ireland semi-final. So that was the way back then. All sorts of higgledy-piggledy versions of competitions.
It's funny, you've talked about soft All-Irelands before now. In fairness, it doesn't get much softer than that. What did they play? Did they play one game to win All-Ireland?
No, Laois would have played a Leinster Championship. They didn't have to play an All-Ireland semi-final. Was it the representative from Ulster? Obviously they didn't put anyone forward that year. Another one is Galway. Their ill-fated sojourn in Munster back in the 60s. So they played for 11 years and they had just one win the whole time. That actually came against Clare in 1961 abroad in Nana, winning by 12 points. But other than that, it was nothing but misery. But no harm to get a little win over your rivals. Other than that, I don't think there was a championship game between the sides. Well, there was another one in 67 that Clare won in Munster, Didn't play again until 1995, but they did have a league final in 87, and I was just looking at who did the score on that day. Galway won it by a couple of points. This was a Galway team that would of course be back-to-back All-Ireland champions around then. Joe Cooney, the great Joe Cooney, with 2-6. Cyril Lyons with 7 points on the other side, Tommy Guilfoyle with a goal, and Anthony Cunningham, who would go on to manage Galway in All-Ireland finals, he ended up with 1-1. But other than that, you can probably see why there wasn't that poison over the years, because they probably weren't meeting in too many big games. I mean, league is league after all.
Isn't it mad to think, you kind of don't realise Galway have been pretty consistent. Like, they've been at the top table for the last 20 or 30 years. But like before, maybe like Cyril Farrell took charge, and in a couple of years before that, when Babs was involved, like Galway were kind of a non-entity. As you were saying in Munster, like there's no impact whatsoever in Munster. Like, it was that bad that they went back to Connacht. To hell or to Connacht, as they say. But it was that bad, and like they're a modern success story. And like I kind of find it funny. People don't really realise just how big of an achievement, say, Cyril Farrell did to get 3 All-Irelands with Galway in 1 decade. Like, it's unbelievable, really. Coming from nowhere, they'd only won 1 before that. Then he comes in, they win 80, 87 and 88. They're probably one of hurling's like modern kind of success stories. And unfortunately, unlike my own county, who've kind of disappeared off the radar, they've managed to stay there and had obviously got another All-Ireland. It was 29 years, but got another All-Ireland in 2017. So like, they've kind of come from nowhere in a way, and they've managed to stay there. And it's funny, we kind of think, if we weren't looking back too much in history, we kind of think that Galway are kind of one of the modern powerhouses, and they are, but historically they definitely weren't. So they've managed to sustain themselves at a high level over the past 30 or 40 years because they were struggling before that.
Yeah, but I can't ignore the fact that you've quoted Oliver Cromwell in here, to hell or to Connacht. Of all things to happen, that you end up bringing that in here. Let's move on to the 1995 All-Ireland semi-final, because this is a game of massive consequence. Clare winning their first Munster title since 1932, and it was, as I said, first championship clash since 1967. So the curtain raiser, as you remember, was Offaly against Down. We won't spend too long talking about that.
Well, far from an epic, yeah, I can assure you.
But you were saying to me that this game should be most remembered because what did you say it was most remembered for? It was that Sparrow's second half goal, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was funny because someone put a clip up on Twitter, and I'd remembered the goal during the match, but she's kind of just looking back on it now. You obviously now. Hurling is so modern, like there's a lot of off the ball running. It's kind of, they've taken in football tactics. But Clare get a goal in the second half. The Sparrow gets a goal that is kind of born out of modern day tactics. The ball goes in, lovely little hand pass over the shoulder to Fergie Toohey on the run, who's coming off the shoulder. He gives a lovely hand pass over the defender, and the Sparrow, the ball hops in front of him and he pulls it to the net. But it's a really kind of a modern day goal. Like, people look back at those matches and they say, "Oh Jesus, the hurling was archaic almost," and it doesn't resemble anything that you see today. But there were glimpses. Obviously, there was a lot of ground hurling, but that was like, it wouldn't have been common to see an off the shoulder kind of a run back then. But Clare were supremely fit. I suppose the reason you didn't see a lot of off-the-shoulder running back then is because, well, that's not how the game was played, and teams generally weren't fit enough to do that.
They were letting the ball do the work. The ball will move a lot faster than you ever will.
Well, no, but that still stands true, and I don't, there are some things that do still stand true in hurling. If you play the ball the right way, particularly like kind of a fast diagonal ball, the ball will still beat the man every time. But it was just interesting to see that sort of a modern tactic being used. That's 25 years ago, in fairness. And I remember that coming out of Croke Park that day. Obviously, we knew we were going to be playing Clare in 95, and all you could hear was that feckin' banner roar, walking back down Clonleaf Road, and my father just kept doing it the whole way home in the car. That banner roar, the noise of it, and everything. It was so significant for them. It must have been unbelievable for Clare at the time. Obviously, neighbouring county with Galway, but I think it was their first All-Ireland semi-final in 65 years, I think. And they were back in an All-Ireland final, and the whole buzz around it. Galway must have been sick because they'd been regularly in All-Ireland semi-finals for the last maybe 15 or 20 years before that. But Clare took their chance, and then obviously we saw what happened with the final, and Eamon Taft been brought on and scored the goal and then been taken back off, and the curse of Biddy early lifted as well. They've
played several times since, actually. So, as we said, historically didn't meet that often. Went on to meet in 1999. It took 2 games for Clare to get through on a replay there. then 2002, 2003, and 2000. It's definitely worth talking about the game in 2007. So Clare 210, Galway 14 points. Clare winning that by a couple. But this was Ger Loughnane managing against his own county. That must have been tough for him.
Oh God, it must have been. Like, I remember like interviews with Loughnane and quotes from Loughnane who said he'd never manage another county. He could never ever see himself manage another county. Then he went to the neighbours, and it's okay. Like, there can be a friendly rivalry sometimes between them, but like when your Messiah goes to another county, there must have been a lot of bitterness in Clare. Without being smart, there must have been a lot of bitterness hoping that he wouldn't get on that well. And in fairness, they probably got their wish. Realistically, his only significant wins, Conor Sketches did a great sketch of Loughnane where he said, they had 2 big championship wins during his time in charge to beat Laois and Antrim. Remember, and he got a right good laugh in a live show saying that. But like that defeat in 2007 in Cusack Park, like they were both going pretty poorly at the time, and for Loughnane to bring Galway to Cusack Park and to be defeated 210 to 14 points when Clare were going through a fair little mutiny at the time, that must have been hard on him, because there was a lot expected of him when he went to Galway. They've gotten outside managers at different stages and have an outside manager now, but to bring in Loughnane, it was a massive deal at the time. I remember them training. They trained in the race course, or trained on a race course, or sand dunes, or something like that. They did animal training in the winter, but it just didn't work out for him. And I suppose to hear the way he had talked about Galway in the decade that followed, before they won the All Ireland as well, he didn't have much graw for the people of Galway. He didn't have much graw for the way the players kind of went on, and he wasn't afraid to let a few things off his chest, maybe things that he'd been storing from a not so successful time in Galway.
Yeah, well, even the interclub rivalries. So of course there was the whole situation with Greg Kennedy and the Cannings, Loughrea against Portumna, and that big issue there that Greg maintains that it definitely wasn't him who stood on Canning's head in that club game, which of course was poisonous affairs that you'd see there. But Damien Hayes, actually, he was quoted about that 2007 game and against Clare, and he goes, I always remember before that game we were in the hotel and getting ready to go. Next thing, Frank Lohan starts walking up towards the hotel. I remember watching this and thinking, what's Frank doing, as I was potentially going to be marking this lad. It turned out Frank was heading up to our hotel to get a rub or some treatment from Colin Flynn, who was part of our setup. I was going on, what's the story here? So that'll just tell you that you can't just ignore these friendships and bonds that you've built up over the years just because you jump over to the other side.
No, that's madness though, isn't it? Imagine that happening now. It's funny because Damien has a Skoda garage down in Clare now, and I'd say Damien was a fair hurler for Galway, but sometimes he would rub opposition fans up the wrong way with the way he'd jump around and celebrate and things like that. So I'd imagine he probably still gets abuse from his playing days down in Ennis.
Yeah, no, we'll go back to some of the senior clashes, but we can't ignore the 2009 under-21 clash. Clare 323, Galway 515. This was an All-Ireland semi-final, and Clare would go on to win the All-Ireland that year. But the Derek Honan versus Joe Canning show was unbelievable. Honan with 2-4 from play. Like this was a performance that promised a decade of greatness from a player who ended up being blighted by injury. But the way he'd just come out in front, 6'7", turn and just burn his man off, just looked unbelievable. And of course, Canning with 4-7 on the other side of it with 2-1 from play. But just virtuoso stuff from both of them.
Yeah, imagine scoring 4-7 and finishing on the losing side. He'd be absolutely sick. It's funny just to see Derek Honan, even watching back clips of that day. He was so fleet-footed for a big fella. Like, he was so fast. It was unnaturally fast. And I suppose the fact, when you say unnatural, maybe it was one of the reasons why it led to him kind of having so many injuries and just how big he is and problems with his hips and training like that. But if he'd been managed correctly, he'd be still hurling with Clare now and would still be a potent force. Like, how do you deal with a lad that's 6'7", has a paw, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the crossbar challenges or anything like that. He's so nonchalant, and he's just able to do it every time. He just walks up. A couple of them, I've seen a couple of different ones honing. He just walks up. He has the skill. He has the pace. He has the size. He has nearly everything that you'd want. But unfortunately, obviously, his career was finished early by injury. And then on the other side, you had Canning kind of, as he did so often, and even what he's still doing to this day, lifting aside to the brink every time and doing things that you don't think he should be able to do. Like the scores Joe Canning has put up throughout his career, and we actually talked, and I'm glad we kind of bring it up here now. We debated about Henry Shefflin versus Joe Canning before, and something that we didn't bring up was, Joe Canning's absolutely unbelievable underage career, including under 21, including Fitzgibbon. Like, Joe Canning was winning Club All-Irelands at 15 and 16. You know what I mean? He was carrying under 21 teams, but he was still minor. I remember him scoring 2-4 against Kilkenny in All-Ireland semi-final in Tullamore. And it can't be understated. He's had a brilliant senior career, but has there ever been, a bigger underage prodigy than Joe Canning? And on the flip side of that, then Honham was a massive prodigy for Clare, and this was really him kind of announcing himself on the national stage. If anyone hasn't watched it, one of the great games to go watching back. McDara McDonagh, literally every 30 seconds is just gasping at what's happening. The action was absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, TG Carr have caught some unbelievable games over the years. I mean, under 21 level has just delivered year after year after year, and it is a shame it's actually gone back to under 20 level. Some of the games were still great last year, but there was just such a perfect format with that under 21 level. It's a shame it's gone. While we're on this, could we move on to what basically turned things around for Clare, which was this whole idea of your darkest day is followed by the dawn, or whatever. I'm after getting that one all wrong, but like either way, Clare were in a bad place in 2011, and they got spanked by Galway in the qualifiers. It was 425 to 0-20, and this ended up being the end of Sparrow O'Loughlin. But what came after it was Davey Fitz, and obviously 2012 didn't go particularly well, but then they ended up winning All Ireland. So there's kind of a bit of that turning point there as well.
Yeah, I thought you were going to start singing Adele or something. There's always darkness before the dawn or something like that.
Do you know what? That would have been more respectable given how I muddled through that.
But it was funny because Galway weren't in a great spot kind of going into that match either, and John McIntyre, who was over them at the time, said, it's a great quote actually, said, I don't know if a few people came expecting to see a wedding or a funeral or something like that. So it was kind of a funeral on the Clare side, and there was a good bit of happiness on the Galway side. But like for Gerard O'Loughlin, like they conceded 4 goals again. Their defence was walked through. He obviously left. Davey came in, and I suppose that was the genesis of Clare coming on and winning the 2013 All-Ireland, and even the league that they won under Davey as well. But that was, they got an awful shellacking that day. And sometimes it's only when something like that happens that, maybe people realise, okay, there's change badly needed here, or things just didn't work out for Sparrow, who was an unbelievable player for Clare, and who we talked about, who was brilliant against Galway in the 95 All-Ireland semi-final, but it just didn't work out when he was Clare manager. And Davey came in, and it led to the first All-Ireland in since 1997. Unbelievable times, but these were very, very, very dark times. They got an awful beat.
Yeah, I remember a red card as well. So yeah, it was just a bad old day at the office. But that 2013 game, the quarter-final in Thurles, that was probably the day that Clare realised we can win an All-Ireland. That was 217 to 70, or sorry, that was 123 to 214. That definitely set up the All-Ireland, because the way they were able to tactically shut down Galway, Patrick Donnellan doing brilliant as a sweeper, I'd say the belief just absolutely shot through the roof after that. If we jump on to 2016...
Just on 13 for a second, Shane. Yeah. I always found it interesting, even with 16 as well. I always found it really, really interesting. I went to UL, obviously, and we came up against LIT the whole time, and Davey was over LIT, and Canning was invariably a star man. And, their whole game plan was around Joe Canning. There's a video on YouTube that people will see Davey's halftime speech one day. It's just get the ball to Joe. And I always found it unbelievably interesting then when Davey was on the other side and he was the manager of Clare trying to nullify Joe. I always loved that. his college game plans were everything was to do with Joe, and then his county game plans when he was on the other side, everything was to do with Joe, but it was negating Joe, and they were able to do that really, really well in 2013. Pat Donlan was able to sit back and totally negate, one of the best players of the modern generation.
2016 then, this is Joe Canning's last championship goal from open play, but this was a day that I think it was Micheál Donoghue was absolutely slated by Loughnane. You've kind of teed this up already, but he had a fair old go at him.
Yeah, this is he had a right go at him after the 2016 Leinster final. So Donoghue kind of came into this game against Clare under a fair bit of pressure.
Well, they'd flopped against Kilkenny in another Leinster final.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point too. I'll just go into it. I'll let Jared do the talking. He says it better than I ever could. So writing in his column in the Star after the Leinster final, he said about Galway, they are always looking to shift the blame after defeat. After the stance they took against Anthony Cunningham, who was obviously ousted the previous winter, this was the day when Galway had to stand up and be counted. Otherwise, they'd rightly be regarded as a laughing stock. This defeat, the Leinster final defeat, showed that they're made of absolutely nothing. You can forget about this Galway team. They have no guts whatsoever. Galway are always looking for a crutch. There's always someone or something to blame. The manager, the trainer, the physio, the length of the grass on the pitch, the weather. After pushing Cunningham out the door, the crutch was kicked away from the Galway players. They had to stand up for themselves. No one would listen if they played the blame game again. And then he goes on to say, and this is fairly hard-hitting stuff against Micheál Donoghue, he's talking about his sideline demeanour, and he makes a reference to Dermot Morgan's 1980s show when he was appeared on Live Mike, it was called. So he said, Galway had a very aggressive manager on the sideline in Cunningham who was prepared to take on Brian Cody. Now they have a manager who reminds me of the Dermot Morgan character Father Trendy from RTE in the 1980s. Micheál Donoghue comes across as an amiable curate coming into a new parish, and they're expecting to win with him, ? Compare Donoghue's body language on the sideline with that of Cody. You don't need to be a genius to work out who's king of the jungle. So, that is fairly hard hitting on it.
But what do you really think, Ger? What do you really think?
Yeah, exactly. In fairness, you never had to worry about Ger sitting on the fence. There was never any hope of him sitting on the fence. He went full bore and said exactly what he thought. Now that was fairly hard hitting. So on the context of the Clare game then in 2016 is, and Davey went absolutely bananas about this. Davey basically said, I think he said it openly enough after. He said basically Loughnane was setting Galway up to beat Clare. He was setting them up. He was basically slating Galway. There had to be a backlash, and he wasn't particularly happy about that. And I think he made his feelings fairly open about it. And Galway came out and delivered a big performance against Clare that day. I remember there was all the talk after. Remember Galway got a goal maybe 10 seconds into the start of the second half, and Clare weren't set up in their sweeper formation, and it was like a system malfunction. That's what everyone was talking about that night. And but Davey was not happy that the manager that had helped him to win 2 All-Irelands as a player had basically set Galway up for a massive rebound and a massive reaction.
Yeah, I think that's looking for an excuse. But the other side, I like the way Loughnane just calls it as he sees it. He doesn't hold back. I mean, he's been there, done it, knows what it's like to get criticism himself. Now, obviously, there are times when he goes in very, very two-footed, but still in all, I'd take that over someone who's just phoning it in and giving you a bland old column. I'd take it any day of the week.
Just on that as well, all the Clare boys would say, and like Dalo would have been angry enough at what Loughnane was saying when he was manager, angry enough about what he was writing in the Star, but he'd always say, just say you slated me and I hadn't met you for a while and there was a bit of tension or whatever. He said they'd meet at a Clare reunion and he'd just be like, Dalo, and they'd be up straight away and they'd be chatting. And it's like, how are you supposed to be upset with this fella? Like, he's broken. If there was any tension or any ice, he's broken it straight away. And it's almost like after 5 minutes, you're kind of like, sure, I can't say anything about what he's written about me. You know what I mean? It's just like he writes it, forgets about it to some extent and moves on. And I'm sure he would have been the same with Donoghue, and he would have been the same with Davey. Anything he said, he kind of wrote it and parked it once it was in the paper the next day.
To be fair to Donoghue, goes on and wins an All-Ireland and ends up with a decent record against Brian Cody, so he fairly much proved his doubters wrong. Obviously didn't go right at the end of 2018, and obviously 2019 disappointing to not get through Leinster, but I think he put a lot of people straight on that. 2018 All-Ireland semi-final, so Galway go into this as reigning All-Ireland champions. There was a real I was one of the greatest games that I've seen in modern times. 1:30 apiece at Croke Park, and it was a game that Galway had won after 15 minutes. Colm Galvin goes back sweeper. Now, a goal still went in after he'd gone back there, but it just changed the game because Galway went long ball throughout the whole thing. And there was a real sliding doors moment with Johnny Cohen. Now, we're probably going to do an episode on that itself later on, but I think, did he miss a chance both in normal time and in extra time? Just his shots went short, or was it just in normal time?
No, he actually dropped the ball short for the winner in normal time, and then put them ahead deep into injury time at the end of extra time. But everyone was saying after that if he'd scored the one in normal time, the game would have been over, and Clare would have been out, Galway would have been in the All-Ireland final and had another week's rest. But he got the one in extra time, and then Jason McCarthy came forward and had his Donal O'Donovan moment. He wasn't long on the pitch, a cornerback/wing back, came up the field and got that, burst through, absolutely haired through, and got that unbelievable point to bring it to a replay. Definitely one of the best games I've been at in recent times. An absolute pleasure to be there. And that was kind of when the two All-Ireland semi-finals were put on the same weekend, and that you were kind of thinking, we've had this absolute epic on Saturday. Limerick and Cork the next day, no way I can match that. Goes to extra time as well. Nicky Quaid's flick, Keane Lynch's goal, everything, and then Limerick booked their place in the All-Ireland final. But the most memorable thing of the whole weekend for me was Peter Duggan's tour de force of a point. I've never seen the like of it.
Improbable.
Oh, yeah, all the talk was Galway obviously had Lucas Kersenstein, the strength and conditioning coach, with them, and all the talk was, Galway, big brutes, like you can't take Galway on physically. Duggan gets a ball underneath the Cusick about 65 yards out, goes soling in. I think there was a total of 5 Galway lads on him at different stages. He gets knocked off balance out near the 13, flicks the ball up with one hand, and then just pulls it over the bar. It was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, the battle of Daithi Burke against John Conlon was fairly special that day.
Yeah. Massive. Conlon was in Hurler of the Year form, and how he didn't get nominated for Hurler of the Year is another story altogether. I don't know how, but he gave Daithi Burke awful trouble. I remember Daithi Burke was carrying an ankle injury into that game, and there was big doubts about whether he'd play. And him being him, he played obviously and was solid, but he definitely wasn't his usual self. Conlon took him for 4 points, but funnily enough, and it was from the replayed game on, John Conlon started wearing that support on his elbow. I clearly picked up some sort of an injury the first day, and Daithi Burke had his number big time the second day. Conlon only got a point the second day, and I think it was near the end of the second half. That was a brilliant game down in Thurles.
Shane O'Donnell's goal. Oh my God.
Shane O'Donnell's goal, where he, again, like Duggan, he took on the Galway defence, that really tough, hard Galway defence, managed to get through. I think Fergal Horgan was refereeing it, played a brilliant advantage to give him a chance to get the goal. Kind of threw the ball down, it hopped, and he pulled it into the back of the net. And funnily enough, my abiding memory of Shane O'Donnell that day is when Aaron Shanner had the chance to level it.
With the goal.
Pulled off. Yeah,
that would have put them ahead later
on. Unbelievable save. Shanaher, literally, you're just thinking he's scooping the ball into net. Shane O'Donnell has the arms out like that and is actually celebrating for a second, and then the ball amazingly comes back out. And then on the back of that, because you had Jake Morris had the same chance down the far end to keep Tipperary in the championship against Clare earlier on the year. So it was just, the drama was amazing, really.
Yeah, and then very interesting, the fallout from this game. Galway go on and win it, but afterwards there was a right furore because Joe Canning put out basically that Red Bull advertisement all over Twitter, and people were talking about, is this the sort of thing that you should be doing right after a big championship match? And I think there was a couple of photos as well that you can see that a few of them are there posing with the Red Bull stuff. But I suppose, hey, good work if you can get it.
Yeah, I remember Brendan Cummins wrote in the Independent a couple of days after, just on that Joe Canning kind of incident after. He said, it struck me as I left Thurles after the All-Ireland semi-final last Sunday that a tweet came out from the account of Joe Canning at 5:15 promoting an energy drink. This was followed by other tweets from the company. When Galway were chasing their first All-Ireland in 29 years, so that's the previous year, there isn't a hope that you would have seen that. Such is the exposure garnered when you're All-Ireland champions. in Limerick, he said in Limerick they care about nothing except bridging the gap of 45 years. And he goes on to say, on the week of the All-Ireland final in 2010, I was working in Kilkenny and walking up the street when I saw 5 in a row t-shirts for sale. All I could think about was, if I never do anything again in my life, there would be no one wearing one of those things come Sunday evening. So it's funny, Joe Canning puts up a tweet as they're leaving, they're in Thurles dressing room at 5:15. Limerick were actually coming from a training camp in Fota Island at the same time. And imagine, they're probably fairly tired after a kind of a bonding weekend where they've done a lot of training. We see that tweet. I'm just saying, I would take a lot of motivation from that. Imagine what someone like Michael Jordan would take from that. I'd say he would have absolutely loved something like that.
Well, he'd have it in for you big time. He'd always find a reason to hate on you. I actually have no problem with it at all. I just think it's striking that it happened. But I think, hey, if you're getting money to do something like that, and you'd imagine that was the case, why not? Go ahead, make the best of it. There was definitely a bit of eyebrows raised because the towel he was using throughout the game also had Red Bull on it, so that was an interesting sort of side note to the whole thing. Let's look at some of the player rivalries. We always do this every week on the Orga rivalries, the orgaretro.com rivalries that we have here. And don't forget, you can put our game into as the promo code and you get 15% off. But if we look at the player rivalries, we have a great one here. Daithi versus Brian Lohan, 2 fair fullbacks.
Oh, this is a brilliant one, because you're talking about Kevin Keenan is the only other fullback that would come into the equation for me in the 1990s. Offaly fullback, 3 All-Stars, but Brian Lohan probably does edge.
I'd like to know if anyone disagrees with you there, and there's anyone else that put in the conversation. But go ahead.
100%. Like Brian Lohan, if you're picking a team of the last 30 years, he's probably your number 3. And the only one I think that would really battle him for that spot is Daithi Burke, who obviously has another couple of years at Galway. Like, if you look at it, like Lohan was Clare's inspiration. Like, it was like Tommy Walsh coming out with that red helmet, bursting out from the half back line. Lohan bursting out from the Clare full back line. His clearance or his ball up the field was worth, anybody else hitting 2 or 3 balls up the field. It just lifted the whole crowd. It's funny how there's just some iconic kind of characters like that. Not forwards, but backs that can have that sort of a lifting influence on a crowd and on a team. And you know what? Daithi Burke's not too far off that when it comes to Galway, because he's kind of reached like mythical status almost now as a fullback. Nobody thinks he can be matched as a fullback. Nobody thinks he can be taken on. And when he catches a ball, which he does regularly, and I remember one catch against Tipperary in the All-Ireland semi-final. I think it was 17 actually. He came out with a ball near the very, very end of the game. And Daithi Burke is as I would say, the only fullback of the last maybe 15 years that can match up against Lohan. And it's funny because whenever action does eventually resume, whether it's this year or next year, you're going to have the 2 fullbacks coming up against each other probably at some stage, you'd imagine. Daithi Burke playing fullback for Galway and Brian Lohan on the line for Clare. So, geez, he'd be hard pressed to pick between the 2 of them.
Yeah, like Brian Lohan, hurler of the year with All-Stars hurler of the year in 1995, 4 All-Stars, so 95, 96, 97, that 3 in a row in 2002. I think Daithi Burke has maybe 4 All-Stars in a row, isn't it? And was one of those at wing back?
Yeah, he won 1 at wing back, won 1 at 4, and then he won full back in 17 and 18.
Yeah, so geez, hard to pick between these 2. And we'll put a poll out there and people can let us know who do you think was better. Is there anything else we've missed in this rivalry? I'm sure there's any amount of different strands, but we've covered a fair whack going back 105 years.
If you were coming through with a ball as a forward, who would you hate to see more coming at you? Brian Lohan or Daithi Burke? I tell you, that's not simple. That is not simple.
Yeah, Brian Lohan might kill you, whereas Daithi Burke, he obviously has the capacity to kill you, but he'd probably stay on you and you wouldn't be able to get away from you, and eventually he'd leave you down on the ground and he'd run off with the ball. So I don't think
I don't know if there's I think it was Luke Scanlon was going through a ball for Kilkenny in the round robin game they played in 18, and he left him in the middle of next week. He'd no problem doing that. He brings that football kind of physicality to it as well. And I suppose what's really good about Daithi Burke is his distribution of the ball is brilliant. He always does. He never goes for the big clearance or anything like that. He does the simple things right. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see who people pick there. Very interesting.
Iconic
Daithi Burke
helmets
obviously
too.
has another couple of years, too, where he can cement himself and maybe try a new Lohan. It'd be interesting.
Yeah, iconic helmets too. Is it the black stripe and the white helmet on Daithi Burke and then the red helmet for
I think
Lohan
it's
as well?
Jacko, I think it's called. Jacko, I think it is. It's on his helmet, yeah.
Okay, so that's it. And again, if you want to go and get these jerseys, go to orgaretro.com and put in the promo code OurGame for 15% off. There's a huge range of jerseys there, so have a look. Thanks very much, Michael.
Cheers, Shane.